Praxeology, the science of human action, the fourth course in clear thinking. Introduction. Why praxeology matters. Every science begins with a starting point. Logic begins with A is A. A thing is itself. Definition begins with words are fences of meaning. 1828 begins with natural language ties words to reality. Praxeology begins with something just as undeniable. Humans act. To act is to choose an end and apply means. To act is to prefer one outcome over another, one time over another, one risk over another. Every step you take, every purchase you make, every plan you form is praxeology in motion. This is not psychology. Psychology asks why people act, their motives, their feelings, their impulses. This is not history. History records what people did, their battles, their inventions, their mistakes. Praxeology is different. It studies the structure of action itself, the logic of choice, the laws that flow from the single fact that humans act with purpose. From this one axiom, entire chains of truth unfold. Because resources are scarce, action requires choice. Because time is limited, we prefer sooner over later. Because the future is uncertain, risk is unavoidable. Because choice exists, exchange and cooperation are possible. Because interference distorts choice, consequences ripple through society. Reflective pause, think of your day so far. Why did you eat breakfast? Or skip it? Why did you check your phone? Or delay it? Why are you listening to this right now? Each decision was not random. Each was an act, aiming at an end through a means. That is praxeology. Why does this matter? Because societies rise or fall on how well they understand action. Prices, markets, profits, losses, cycles, they are not arbitrary. They are the mathematics of human action written in the language of exchange. And when those signals are ignored, distorted, or manipulated, civilization itself begins to stumble. This book is about clarity at the deepest level. Logic taught you to think without contradiction. Definitions taught you to speak without vagueness. 1828 taught you to anchor words to reality. Now, praxeology teaches you to understand society itself, how human action creates order, and how interference creates disorder. This is not theory for economists only. It is structure for everyone who acts, which means everyone. To understand praxeology is to understand yourself, your choices, your relationships, your economy, your freedom. Closing note for intro: praxeology is not abstract. It is practical. It tells you why trade benefits both sides, why money emerges without decree, why prices coordinate knowledge, why intervention creates consequences, why liberty protects the very logic of action itself. Praxeology begins with the undeniable. Humans act. From that fact, the entire architecture of society unfolds. Welcome to the science of human action. Praxeology, the science of human action, Part I. The ground of human action. Chapter 1, Action as Purpose. To live is to act. But action is not random motion. Action is purposeful behavior. To act means you imagine an end, something better than your present state. You choose means, tools, steps, or methods to reach that end. You carry it out. If you are thirsty, your end is to quench thirst. Your means might be pouring water. If you are tired, your end is rest. Your means might be lying down. If you want knowledge, your end is understanding. Your means might be reading this book right now. This is the starting point of praxeology. Every human action aims at ends through means. Reflective plus think of the last three things you did. What was the end you aimed at? What means did you choose? Did you succeed? Or did you misjudge? Praxeology does not ask why you wanted those ends. It only studies the structure. You had an end, and you acted with means. Chapter 2, Scarcity. If all desires could be satisfied instantly, there would be no action. But the world is scarce. You cannot eat and sleep at the same time. You cannot spend the same dollar on food and on fuel. You cannot be in two places at once. Because our wants are many and resources are limited, we must choose. And every choice has a cost. The value of what we gave up. Economists call this opportunity cost. Example, if you spend an hour watching TV, that hour cannot also be spent learning a skill. If you spend money on a luxury, that money cannot also go to savings. Scarcity forces trade-offs. Scarcity is why choice exists at all. Reflective pause. What was the last choice you made that forced you to give something up? What was the opportunity cost? Praxeology says, scarcity is not a problem to be solved. It is a condition of reality. It is the reason why we must act at all. Chapter 3. Time preference. Action always unfolds in time, and humans value time unequally. We prefer satisfaction sooner rather than later. This is called time preference. A child wants candy now rather than tomorrow. An investor may accept less money today if he cannot trust a promise of more tomorrow. A worker demands wages at regular intervals, not just at the end of his life. This does not mean humans always choose the immediate. Some wait, save, or invest, but only if the expected future reward outweighs the present satisfaction. Example, you may choose to skip dessert tonight to feel healthier tomorrow. But if tomorrow feels uncertain or too far away, you may eat it now. Time preference explains saving, investing, interest rates, even why civilizations grow or decay. Reflective pause. Look at your own habits. When do you choose the present over the future? When do you sacrifice the present for a greater future gain? Praxeology shows every choice contains a judgment of time. Chapter 4. Uncertainty. The future is never fully known. We act because we expect, but we cannot guarantee. The farmer plants, not knowing if rains will come. The entrepreneur builds, not knowing if customers will buy. The student studies, not knowing if opportunities will appear. Uncertainty is not a flaw. It is a fact of life. And it is why risk, probability, and judgment are central to human action. Example, if the future were perfectly predictable, there would be no need for choice. We would all simply follow the script. But because the future is open, action requires courage, calculation, and sometimes luck. Reflective pause. Think of one risk you took recently. What outcome did you expect? What uncertainty did you face? Praxeology does not remove uncertainty. It shows why all action is shaped by it. Closing part. I. Action as purpose, scarcity as condition, time preference as horizon, uncertainty as atmosphere. These are the ground of human action. They are not theories. They are not policies. They are structures, woven into the very nature of choice. Praxeology, the science of human action. The fifth course in clear thinking. Introduction. Why praxeology matters. All science begins with something undeniable. Logic begins with the law of identity. A thing is what it is. Definition begins with the fence of meaning. Words are boundaries that protect clarity. 1828 begins with natural language. Words tied to reality. Praxeology begins with its own foundation. Humans act. What does that mean? It means humans do not merely move like rocks rolling downhill or plants growing toward sunlight. Humans choose. They select ends and apply means. They imagine a better state of affairs and move toward it with purpose. This one fact, humans act, is enough to build an entire science. Praxeology is the logic of human action. It is not psychology, which asks why people act, their feelings, motives, impulses. It is not history, which records what people did in the past. It is not sociology, which describes group patterns. Praxeology is something different, the structure of action itself. From this starting point flow laws that cannot be denied. Because the world is scarce, humans must choose. Because time is limited, humans value sooner and later differently. Because the future is uncertain, humans face risk. Because humans act, they can exchange, cooperate, and trade. Because action requires signals, Prices emerge. Because interference distorts signals, consequences ripple through society. Praxeology reveals that economics, law, and even politics are not arbitrary debates. They are downstream from the structure of action. Why does this matter? Because when societies forget these structures, they collapse into chaos. When leaders ignore them, policies fail. When individuals misunderstand them, they make poor choices. This book will teach you to see the invisible order of action. Why trade benefits both sides. Why money emerges without decree. Why prices are signals, not decorations. Why profit and loss guide coordination. Why interventions create unintended consequences. Why liberty is not just a moral claim, but the logical condition of action itself. Reflective pause. Think of your day so far. Every step you took was an action. Rising, eating, listening, deciding. Each had an end. Each used means. That is praxeology at work. You already live it. The task now is to see it clearly. Part I. The ground of human action. Chapter 1. Action as purpose. To act is to aim. Every human action points to an end, a desired state of affairs. The child cries for food. The traveler walks toward shelter. The student opens a book. Each of these is purposeful behavior, a step chosen to reach a goal. Action always contains three elements. 1. The actor, the human choosing. 2. The end, the goal imagined. 3. The means, the path selected. Without an end, there is no action. Without means, there is no movement. Without choice, there is no praxeology. Examples. Thirst is a felt uneasiness. Drinking water is the means. Quenching thirst is the end. Cold is discomfort. Lighting a fire is the means. Warmth is the end. Ignorance is unease. Reading is the means. Understanding is the end. This is why praxeology begins with action, because it is the simplest unit of human existence. Reflective pause. Think of the last 3 things you did. What end were you aiming at? What means did you choose? Were they effective, or did you misjudge? Praxeology does not ask why you wanted those ends. It only studies the structure of choice itself. Chapter 2. Scarcity. If the world gave us everything instantly, there would be no action. But the world is scarce. You cannot be in 2 places at once. You cannot spend the same dollar twice. You cannot eat and save the same loaf of bread. Because wants exceed resources, choice is necessary. And choice means trade-offs. Every yes is also a no. Every act accepts one path and rejects another. Economists call this the opportunity cost, the value of what is given up. Examples. Watching TV for an hour costs you the book you didn't read. Buying new clothes costs you the savings you didn't add. Going to one event costs you the other event you missed. Scarcity is not a problem to solve. It is a condition of reality. It is why economics exists. Reflective pause. Think of one decision you made today. What did you gain? What did you give up? What was the opportunity cost? Praxeology shows that every choice is a judgment of value under scarcity. Chapter 3. Time preference. Action takes place in time, and humans value time differently. We prefer sooner to later. This is called time preference. A child wants candy now rather than tomorrow. A worker demands wages now rather than at the end of his life. An investor accepts lower returns today if tomorrow feels uncertain. Humans can wait, save, and invest, but only if the expected future reward outweighs the present satisfaction. Examples. You may skip dessert tonight to feel healthier tomorrow. You may save money now for retirement later. A farmer plants seeds, sacrificing food now for a harvest later. Civilization itself depends on lowering time preference. When people are willing to wait, invest, and build for the future, progress accelerates. When people demand only the immediate, cultures decay. Reflective pause. When do you favor the present over the future? When do you sacrifice now for a greater later? Praxeology teaches that all choice contains a judgment of time. Chapter 4. Uncertainty. The future is never fully known, and that uncertainty shapes all action. The farmer plants, not knowing if rains will come. The entrepreneur builds, not knowing if customers will buy. The student studies, not knowing if opportunities will appear. Uncertainty is not error, it is condition, and it is why judgment, risk, and entrepreneurship matter. Examples. Insurance exists because of uncertainty. Profits exist because of uncertainty. Innovation exists because of uncertainty. If the future were perfectly predictable, no action would be needed. We would all simply follow the script. Reflective pause. What risk did you take recently? What did you expect? How did uncertainty shape your choice? Praxeology does not remove uncertainty. It explains why all action lives inside it. End of Part I. The ground of human action. Scarcity, time preference, uncertainty. These are the soil in which all human behavior grows. They are not theories. They are not opinions. They are facts of structure. Praxeology, the science of human action. Part 2. Economic laws from action. Chapter 5. Exchange. From scarcity flows choice. From choice flows exchange. Why do humans trade? Because each person values things differently. If I value your apple more than my orange, and you value my orange more than your apple, we both gain by trading. This is not opinion, it is structure. Exchange happens only when both sides expect to benefit. Otherwise, no trade occurs. Examples. A farmer trades grain for milk. Both end richer, one with food, the other with drink. A worker trades labor for wages. The worker prefers money to his time. The employer prefers time to money. A child trades candy for toys. Each walks away happier than before. This is the law of exchange. Trade is voluntary because both sides gain by their own judgment. Reflective pause. Think of your last purchase. You gave up money for something else. Why? Because at that moment, you valued what you received more than the cash. That simple truth, different values, voluntary swap, explains why markets exist at all. Chapter 6. Money. If exchange is natural, money is inevitable. In small groups, people barter. Apples for oranges, shoes for fish. But barter breaks down. What if you want bread, but the baker doesn't want shoes? What if you want a house, but all you have is eggs? What if you want to save, but eggs rot? To solve this, societies discover a medium of exchange, something nearly everyone accepts. Over time, it becomes money. Money is not invented by decree. It emerges as the most marketable good, portable, durable, divisible, recognizable. Historically, gold, silver, salt, shells, cattle, paper backed by metal, and finally today's fiat currencies. Examples. In prison, cigarettes became money, portable, divisible, widely valued. In digital networks, some treat Bitcoin as money, scarce, transferable, not easily forged. In ancient times, gold emerged as money because it was rare, durable, and desired. Money is not just a convenience. It makes calculation possible. Without money, large-scale coordination is chaos. Reflective pause. Think of your last few trades. How many of them use direct barter? Almost none. Why? Because money is the universal bridge, the language of exchange. Chapter 7. Calculation. Money does more than store value. It allows calculation. Prices are signals. They condense millions of judgments about scarcity, desire, and cost into a single number. If bread is expensive, it signals scarcity or high demand. If oil is cheap, it signals abundance or low demand. If wages rise, it signals labor is scarce or valued. Without prices, producers are blind. They cannot know whether resources are being used wisely. Examples: in a free market, a builder decides whether to use steel or wood based on prices. The prices reflect scarcity and preference. In a centrally planned system without prices, choices are guesswork. Misallocation is inevitable. During socialism in the 20th century, planners had data but no true prices. Without exchange, calculation collapses. This is why Mises declared, calculation is impossible without prices, and prices are impossible without money. Reflective pause. Think of your last decision that involved money. You didn't need to measure labor hours, land fertility, and transportation manually. The price carried all that information for you. Prices are not decoration. They are the nervous system of the economy. Chapter 8. Intervention. What happens when force distorts exchange? Intervention is when a third party, usually the state, compels, forbids, or redirects action. A tax compels you to give up wealth you would have used elsewhere. A subsidy pays someone to act differently than they otherwise would. A price control forbids exchange at a natural rate. Intervention breaks the link between choice and consequence. And because praxeology studies structure, it shows distortions always create ripples. Examples: rent control keeps prices low for tenants, but discourages landlords from maintaining or building housing. Shortages appear. Minimum wage laws raise wages for some but price others out of work. Unemployment rises. Printing money increases demand temporarily, but distorts prices, causing booms and crashes. Every intervention has unintended consequences. Why? Because it forces action against voluntary preference, disrupting the signals of scarcity, time, and uncertainty. Reflective pause. Think of one law, tax, or regulation you know. What action does it forbid, compel, or redirect? What ripple effects follow? Praxeology shows intervention is never neutral. It changes the structure of choice, and therefore the outcomes. End of part 2. Economic laws. From human action come exchange, money, calculation, and the lessons of intervention. These are not inventions of economists. They are laws of structure. When ignored, civilizations stumble. When respected, societies thrive. Yes, praxeology, the science of human action. Part 3, the logic of markets. Chapter 9, entrepreneurship. Markets are not machines that run themselves. They are processes of discovery. At the heart of that discovery is the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is not just a business owner. He is anyone who acts under uncertainty, takes risks, and tries to coordinate resources for a profit. A shopkeeper who guesses which products to stock is an entrepreneur. An investor who risks capital on a new venture is an entrepreneur. A farmer who tries a new crop is an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship exists because the future is uncertain. If the future were guaranteed, no judgment would be needed. Examples: Steve Jobs guessing the world wanted an iPhone before the world knew it wanted one. A local restaurant trying a new menu, risking failure but hoping for demand. A teenager starting a lawn mowing service, investing in tools and betting on customers. The entrepreneur is rewarded with profit if his judgment matches reality. He is punished with loss if it does not. Reflective pause. Think of a time you tried something new, a business, an investment, even a hobby. You acted as an entrepreneur, facing uncertainty, risking failure, seeking gain. Chapter 10, profit and loss. Profit and loss are not moral judgments. They are feedback signals. Profit means resources were used in a way that matched what people wanted. Loss means resources were wasted relative to what people wanted. Neither is guaranteed. Both are signals. Examples: if a baker makes bread no one buys, he takes a loss. The loss signals resources need to be reallocated. If another baker sells out daily, he earns profit. The profit signals produce more bread. This is valuable. An investor in solar panels profits if customers adopt them, but loses if they do not, regardless of his hopes. Without profit and loss, entrepreneurs cannot know whether they are creating value or destroying it. Reflective pause. Think of a time you failed at something and lost resources, money, time, energy. That was lost as feedback. Think of a time you succeeded and gained more than you put in. That was profit as feedback. Profit and loss are society's way of correcting itself without central command. Chapter 11. Capital and Structure. Human action unfolds in time. Some projects take minutes, others take decades. Capital is the bridge that allows time to be structured. Capital goods are tools, machines, and resources used to produce other goods. Capital structure is the web of production spread over time. Examples: a farmer with only his hands can feed himself. A farmer with tools, seeds, irrigation, and tractors can feed thousands. A factory builds cars, but only because there is steel, energy, labor, and logistics, each requiring earlier investments. Your education is capital. Years of effort invested now to produce higher skills later. Capital is built by saving and investing, giving up present consumption for future production. The structure of capital determines whether a society can build advanced technology, sustain growth, or collapse into poverty. Reflective pause. Think of one tool you use daily: your phone, your car, even a chair. Each represents layers of capital built over centuries. Without capital, you would be back at bare hands. Chapter 12. Cycles. If action is structured by scarcity, time, and uncertainty. If markets are guided by profit and loss, then what happens when money and credit are distorted? You get cycles. Business cycles are not natural. They are caused when money and credit are expanded beyond real savings. Cheap credit makes projects look profitable that really are not. Entrepreneurs borrow to build things that cannot be sustained. Consumers spend more than they have. Prices and wages rise artificially. When reality sets in, when savings run out or credit tightens, the boom collapses. Projects fail. Jobs vanish. The bust arrives. Examples: the Great Depression, triggered by massive credit expansion in the 1920s. The 2008 financial crisis, triggered by housing loans made beyond real ability to pay. Countless local booms and busts in history: tulips, railroads, dot-coms, all following the same pattern. The cycle is not random. It is structured distortion. Intervention into money breaks the signals of profit and loss. Reflective pause. Think of the last boom you saw in your lifetime. A market rising fast, then collapsing. Did people act as if wealth was limitless? Did reality eventually catch up? Praxeology shows cycles are not acts of nature. They are consequences of broken calculation. End of part 3. The logic of markets: entrepreneurship, profit and loss, capital, and cycles. Together they explain how markets work, why they create wealth, and why interference leads to collapse. Yes, Praxeology, the science of human action. Part 4. The logic of power. Chapter 13. Taxation. At its core, taxation is not exchange. It is compulsion. Involuntary trade. Both sides benefit by their own judgment. In taxation, one side pays under threat of punishment. The difference is not small. It changes the logic of action. Examples: if you buy a loaf of bread, you judge the bread worth more than the money. If you are taxed for the same amount, you did not choose the exchange. It was enforced. This distinction explains why praxeology separates taxation from market activity. Taxation shifts resources, but not by voluntary preference. It alters what would have happened naturally. Reflective pause. Think of your last tax payment. If you had the full choice, would you have spent that money differently? That gap between your preference and the enforced outcome is the essence of taxation. Chapter 14. Regulation. Regulation is not a price signal. It is a command. When regulators decree how an action must be done, they replace choice with rule. You may not build unless you follow this plan. You must hire under these conditions. You cannot sell below this price. The effect is to distort coordination. where markets align resources through voluntary signals. Regulation imposes uniform patterns, sometimes helpful, often harmful. Examples: a law forces all products to meet a specific standard. This may raise safety, but it also raises costs, excluding smaller producers. A licensing law requires years of training for simple tasks. It protects established interests but denies entry to newcomers. A minimum price law forces higher costs for consumers, creating surpluses. Regulation is an attempt to substitute command for calculation. It may succeed temporarily, but at the cost of flexibility and discovery. Reflective pause. Think of one regulation you know. Who does it protect? Who does it exclude? What actions are prevented that might otherwise have been tried? Praxeology asks these questions not morally, but structurally. Chapter 15. Inflation. Inflation is not just rising prices. It is the hidden tax of money manipulation. When new money is created, purchasing power shifts before prices adjust. Early receivers spend the new money while prices are still low. Later receivers pay higher prices without gaining new income. The structure of exchange is distorted. Signals of scarcity and value are blurred. Examples: a central bank prints money to stimulate spending. Asset prices rise first. Those holding stocks gain before wages adjust. Government spending funded by new money raises demand in one sector, but leaves shortages elsewhere. Ordinary savers see their purchasing power eroded, even if their income does not fall. Inflation is theft by dilution. It does not create new wealth. It only redistributes existing wealth by stealth. Reflective pause. Think of how prices have changed in your lifetime. Did your income rise at the same pace? Or did you feel poorer even as numbers grew? That gap is inflation's effect on action. Chapter 16. Cantillon Effects. Richard Cantillon, an 18th century economist, noticed something crucial. New money does not enter society evenly. It flows through specific channels, and those who receive it first benefit more than those who receive it last. Bankers, financiers, and governments spend first. Producers and workers receive money later, when prices have already risen. The poor and fixed income groups receive it last, when purchasing power has been fully eroded. This is the Cantillon effect, the structural inequality created by money printing. Examples: in modern economies, financial markets often rise first after monetary expansion. Wealthy investors gain before everyday consumers face higher grocery bills. In housing booms, developers and banks profit early while ordinary buyers pay inflated prices later. In crises, government contractors receive new funds quickly, while citizens face shortages and rising costs. The Cantillon effect is why inflation is not neutral. It always favors early receivers and punishes late receivers. Reflective pause. Look at recent bailouts or stimulus programs. Who got the money first? Who got it last? Praxeology says, follow the money's path, and you will see the hidden redistribution. End of part 4. The logic of power taxation, regulation, inflation, and Cantillon effects. Together they show how power alters action. Voluntary exchange is replaced by compulsion. Price signals are replaced by commands. Wealth is redistributed by force or stealth. Praxeology, the science of human action. Part V, living with praxeology. Chapter 17, ends and means in daily life. Praxeology is not only about markets. It is about every choice you make. Every action is an attempt to replace a less satisfactory state with a more satisfactory one. You choose to wake up early for exercise, or to sleep in. You choose to spend money on a meal today, or save for tomorrow. You choose to work long hours, or to rest with family. Each choice reveals your ends and your means. Examples: if you spend money on travel, you value the experience more than what else you could have bought. If you study at night, you value future knowledge more than present leisure. If you act kindly, you value relationship more than the cost of effort. Praxeology sharpens your awareness of trade-offs. You cannot have everything. Every choice is a statement of what matters to you. Reflective pause. Think of one choice you regret. Was it because you misjudged your ends? Or because you chose weak means? Praxeology gives you a framework to diagnose and improve. Chapter 18. Sound Action. Sound action is not about perfection. It is about clarity. A sound action means 1. The end is clear. 2. The means are chosen realistically. 3. The trade-offs are understood. 4. The uncertainty is acknowledged. Examples: unsound. I'll get rich quickly with no risk. Contradiction. Sound. I'll save 10% of my income steadily, knowing it grows slowly but surely. Unsound. I'll always be healthy without effort. Denial of entropy. Sound. I'll maintain exercise and diet to slow decay. Praxeology helps you debug action. If your plan ignores scarcity, time, or uncertainty, it will fail. If it respects them, it will endure. Reflective pause. Think of one plan you are making right now. Does it acknowledge scarcity, time, and uncertainty? If not, refine it. That refinement is sound action. Chapter 19. Sound money. Money is not just paper or numbers. It is the nervous system of exchange. Sound money is money that holds its value and cannot be manipulated at will. It is scarce, so it cannot be inflated endlessly. It is stable, so prices signal reality. It is neutral, so Cantillon effects are minimized. Without sound money, society lives in distortion. Prices become false signals. Calculation collapses, and cycles multiply. Examples: gold historically served as sound money because it could not be created by decree. Fiat currencies often decay because they can be printed without restraint. Digital assets claim to be new sound money, but their test is still unfolding. Praxeology insists society cannot coordinate without honest signals. Sound money is the foundation of sound calculation. Reflective pause. Look at your own savings. Do they store value or erode over time? Praxeology says the quality of money shapes the quality of action in society. Chapter 20. Sound freedom. Freedom is not just a moral claim. It is the logical environment required for action. If humans act, they must be free to choose. If they are compelled, their action is distorted. If their signals are manipulated, their action is misled. Praxeology shows that liberty is not an ideology. It is the operating condition for human action to function. Without freedom, markets collapse. Without freedom, calculation fails. Without freedom, society decays. Examples: where people are free to trade, wealth rises. Where people are free to innovate, knowledge spreads. Where people are forced, stagnation follows. Freedom protects the logic of action itself. Reflective pause. Think of one freedom you exercise daily: choosing work, choosing food, choosing words. Now imagine if each were compelled. Would action still make sense? Praxeology says, without freedom, the logic of action itself breaks. Closing transmission. Praxeology is not theory. It is structure. It begins with the undeniable. Humans act. From that single fact, the entire architecture of economics and society unfolds. Scarcity, time, uncertainty, exchange, money, calculation, profit and loss, capital, cycles, taxation, regulation, inflation, Cantillon effects, ends and means, sound action, sound money, sound freedom. To understand praxeology is to understand society. To defend it is to defend liberty. When you live with praxeology, you see trade-offs clearly. You respect time. You plan under uncertainty. You value honest signals. And you guard freedom as the firewall of human action. Final reflection: the logic of action is not optional. You live it every day. The only choice is whether you see it clearly or remain blind to it. Praxeology is the science of seeing. Carry it forward.